Pleased with the extraordinary cast I managed to assemble. It's very, very difficult to cast young, because if they're young and well-known, the chances are they're just booked up because the system is greedy for young talent. And if they're young and unknown, it's hard to be sure whether the money people will be satisfied with them. And there were two important parts, and I'd been struggling and struggling to cast them. And I'd cast Michael Sheen, whom I'd worked with in the film Wild. He'd played Robbie Ross, and I knew how good he was. And he played the sort of Brian Howard figure. But there were two parts, and I'd had literally a day and two-thirds looking at young actors, some still at drama school, some just left, and then I had two in a row. One was, they were both Scottish, and one came in and read, and he'd just done half a line. I thought, well, that's him. And I almost said, that's it, no, sorry, stop, which I realized would make him think, oh, God, I'm crap, I better go. It's the weird thing, is the longer someone stays in an audition, the less you actually like them. You're just trying to give them a chance to maybe change your mind. But when someone is perfect, you just know it straight away, and you just think, fine, go away, it's fine, it's all right, because you're going to just be in touch with their agents and say you've got the part, which you're not allowed to do when you're there, of course. Anyway, this first Scot, he was so brilliant. He left, and I turned to the casting director who had, compiled all these people for me. I said, he's got to be, what's his name again? David Tennant. Right, David Tennant. So brilliant, brilliant. And then this other one comes in, even younger, even more Scottish, if that makes any sense. And even more brilliant, almost. I'm thinking, okay, this is... either I am just hallucinating because I've been here for 2 days and I'm so desperate, or this guy is brilliant. So, again, I just want to say, shut up, you've got the part. But I let him speak. I said, thanks, great. And what was his name? James McAvoy, right? So I went to James McAvoy. And that's the kind of fortune you have. And to have had all the others, to have Peter O'Toole and Stephen Campbell-Moore and Emily Mortimer and Fenella Woolgar. I mean, it was just an extraordinary cast. And I was really, really lucky to have that. I took them all. It's a thing about the English, this could cover you, as in you and non-you. Remember the famous noblesse oblige that Nancy Mitford compiled, in which the you and non-you was posited. In other words, that these days, class is not indicated by money, but simply by vocabulary, not even by accent. And that's where you and non-you arose in the 50s. But I was interested in accent too. We all know that, as it were, it's you to say napkin and non-you to say serviette and all that sort of thing. But I was interested in accent, and I had this knowledge, but I didn't know how to impart it to the actors without sounding like a snob myself, that the accent they were mostly doing, which was a sort of Celia Johnson accent, was middle class. You know that, oh, Freddie, oh gosh, you know that. It sounds upper class to us now, but that accent, that brief encounter accent, is absolutely middle class. And aristocrats didn't sound like that. And I'd heard them, and I thought, well, I'll go to the source. By this time, Diana Mitford, to whom Vile Bodies incidentally was dedicated under the name of Mrs. Brian Guinness, but she then married Oswald Mosley, and so she was now Diana Mosley. But she had just died, but the younger sister, the Duchess of Devonshire, the famous Debo, was still alive. So I, knowing her slightly, called her up and said, could I bring round a fleet of actors and ask you to tell them how society people spoke in as they'd say in America, back in the day? She said, oh, I'd be delighted. So I took them all round. She felt great, particularly for James. She felt, isn't he lovely? And she said, well, I've been thinking about it. You have to forget, it's all nonsense now. She said, my grandson says toilet. And I said, well, the future Duke of Devonshire says toilet? Oh, no, it's nothing sacred. But she said, I think I can best describe how we spoke by saying that the middle classes, if they had to give a sort of an ejection of surprise, would go, oh. Whereas we would give it at least 2 syllables. Oh. So that was her tip. So it's that generosity of Val. Yeah. Wagner, go on. No.
Wagner.
Oh.
I was in Wales, Waugh, Woodhouse. You're right, Wagner.
Yes, I do have a lot of W's in my life with Woodhouse and Waugh and Wilde. And Richard Wagner, who I recently not got out of my system, but it's a strange thing growing up as someone with Jewish blood in you, finding that the music and drama of Richard Wagner has an extraordinary effect on you, one that you think of as a force for good, that this is great art, truly, truly great and extraordinary art, and yet knowing that he himself was such a monster, and that he inspired such monsters, principally the Hitler we've already discussed. And so he's not to everyone's taste. I mean, aside from his own unpleasantness and aside from the connection with Nazism, about which one could talk forever, there is simply the length of his works. I mean, the Ring Cycle is 4 operas, not that he called them operas, but let's call them operas just for the sake of convenience, which you have to see over a week. So you see Das Rheingold, the first one, on Monday. That's an average length opera. It's about 3.5 hours usually, something like that. Then on Tuesday you see Die Walküre, which is it's 4.5 hours. Then you get Wednesday off. Well, it's not you that are getting Wednesday off, it's the singers who are getting Wednesday off. Then Thursday you get Siegfried, the third one. And now you're going into the theatre about 3 o'clock in the afternoon in order to come out at a reasonable time, like 10:30. So then you get Friday off, and then you get the biggie, then you get Goethe Dämmerung. And that's huge. I mean, it's in 3 acts, like all of them. The first act is longer than the whole of Tosca. I mean, this is what you're talking about. Meistersinger is longer than even Goethe Dämmerung. So these are massive works, and it is easy to see why all the jokes go, it's got marvellous moments, but terrible half hours, and, all that sort of thing. But once it enters your soul, it's very hard for it not to be there. And even if one was to say one despised it, it's the enormousness and the enormity, if you like, of his legacy. One of the nicest things that ever happened to me as far as Wagner is concerned is years and years ago I wrote for the Listener magazine, a regular column, the Listener is long defunct, of course, and I happened to write a review of a book by Brian McGee called Aspects of Wagner, which is still one of the best books written on Wagner. A very, very short book, oddly enough. And a week and a half later, I got a letter. It said, All Souls College, Oxford. Dear Mr. Fry, I read with interest your views on Wagner, your views as a Jew on Wagner, your views as a non-religious Jew on Wagner, your views as a Wagnerite on Wagner, your views as a Wagnerite on Jews. And he wrote like very funny, elegant letter. Perhaps a lunch would not disgust you. I have a club in London called the Garrick. Maybe we could meet there. Yours, etc., Isaiah Berlin. God. So I thought I'd do anything. I'd walk 10 miles over broken glass with no shoes to meet Berlin. So, of course, I said yes. And we met. And he loved Wagner too, but also, of course, had the gravest doubts about it. But he said, he had a very guttural voice, which I won't try and repeat, but it always sounded as if he was about to choke. But he said, if a genius, he said, there are ways people define genius, and it's not really a very useful word, but there ought to be a word, and it may as well be genius, that describes someone who, whatever their field may be, when they leave it, it is different. Nothing is the same because they lived in that field. They changed the way things were done. And in those terms, Wagner was the greatest genius in art there ever was. There is something so extraordinary about the emotions unleashed in his music. Once you enter it, I understand how you see dragons and goddesses. It's like bloody Tolkien. I don't want that. Well, I can fully understand that. I happen not to be a fan of Tolkien particularly, and it's certainly nothing to do with dragons and goddesses that makes me love it. It's so hugely emotional, and it's about love and redemption, and it's so beautiful and astounding and explosive. Anyway, I can tell